All right. So today we will begin with Shemot, which is also known as Exodus, chapter 26, verse 31. So we will most likely finish the chapter today. All right. So literally in English, it would basically say, "And do you curtain violet and purple and scarlet, crimson and six from twisted did devise he does her kerevim." So it's vet asita, you hear asa, to labor, to work about, to make, to produce, to manufacture, to fabricate. So we're making something again, I'm just saying. You get the idea. Parochet. Guys, remember that word for curtain, a veil? Specifically here, it's the one that's used in the tabernacle. You remember, you know the difference. The tabernacle is the tent in the wilderness, and the temple is the building made out of stone. Just saying. So this is the veil or the curtain. Then it says techelet. You've heard this word before. Violet. It's a shellfish, i.e. a species of mussel found in the Mediterranean Sea with a blue shell from which the cobalt purple is made. Hence, cobalt purple and garments dyed with this purple. There was a period of time when the excuse given by Jews for not wearing the blue thread in their tzitzit, in their tzitziot, was because this species of mussel was thought to be extinct. So the excuse was, we don't know what color of the blue is supposed to be, so it's better not to put any blue in there at all than to get the wrong color of blue. The tragedy in that thinking is, first off, in thinking that God is so hateful and vindictive and horrible that he would punish you for putting the wrong kind of blue in something. It's an awful way to see God, just absolutely awful. But it went on for a very long time. Well, then all of a sudden, not too terribly long ago, this mussel just began to appear again. So it was obviously not extinct, but it just somehow, maybe its numbers dwindled down to near extinction. But then all of a sudden, it just started flourishing again. So at this point in time, you can actually get this blue color from that mussel, from that species of mussel, which is called techelet. The argument is, did the name techelet start with the mussel, or did it start with the color? I contend that it started with the color. Just because there's a mussel that produces a dye that can make that color does not mean that the word started with the mussel. In Hebrew, they use this word violet of that mussel because it's the color that comes from that mussel. It's more about the color than it is about the mussel. So you have that whole argument to deal with. In the end, God said to make it this color. How you make it that color, he didn't say he had a preference. And for us to put a preference on him is for us to add to or take away, if you will, from his word, which he's already told us to never do. I think that you're better off putting the wrong color of blue and saying, God, I did my best, than you are saying, God, I was so terrified of what you might do to me that I didn't do what you told me to. We even have an example of that in first century literature by a rabbi who said basically the same thing I just said. It's better to try to obey than it is to just not obey out of fear. But anyway, here's the interesting thing, though. I've purchased, it's very pricey to purchase that blue color. It has never been cobalt in color. It has never been purplish in color. It has always been blue, what we call blue. Now, in the 1850s, that may have been considered a cobalt color. I do not know, but I'm guessing probably so. or it may have just been a guess on their part if in the 1850s the species of this mussel was not known. Well, there you have it, right? They didn't know, so they were guessing it was cobalt. Well, it's not cobalt. It's very much a blue color. But here's the thing. The longer you have this color, and if you want to see it, here it is right here. That's actually from that mussel. Can you see it in any way, shape, or form? Can't really see it, can you? They got the hippie thing going. Anyway, trying to get it level, but I can't seem to do it. So it's a blue color, but here's the thing. The longer you have this, the lighter the blue. So it's always in a changing state of blue. And given that God didn't say, well, you know, you got to change it out every 3 months because the blue is the wrong color. You see where the whole argument about not knowing the right color of blue starts to fade away when you realize this color fades. It is not a permanent color, and it will always be different. One mussel is going to be darker than the next. One mussel is going to be lighter than the next. It's nature, and there is no set color that you can put a, you know, pixel, you know, that color number they give, whatever, I forget what those are called, but there's a set of numbers they assign to color, and now I can't even remember what that's called. I used to deal with that all the time when I was a programmer, but it's been a long time ago. So anyway, you guys get the point. It's nonsensical. Of course, now they have another reason. And in the end, it just boils down to, we will not do what God says to do. We're going to do what we want to do. That's really all it amounts to. So then our next word is ve'argaman, and purple. So now we're talking about, first it was purples and now it's purple. But this purple is a reddish purple, a precious color obtained from some species of shellfish. So the other one was a mussel. This is a shellfish found on the shores of the Mediterranean. Anything dyed with purple cloth, a mussel from which the reddish purple is produced. So I don't know if a shellfish is a mussel or if that's something totally different, but now it's two different things, according to Gesenius. Anywho, you get the idea that it's a reddish purple. So your other color may have been a cobalt blue. You know, maybe there are some that will put out that cobalt color. All I've ever seen is pretty much a dark blue down to a very light blue. And then now this is a reddish purple color. And then it says vetolaat and scarlet. Scarlet. Isn't that red? But this word is also used of a worm. So was it the name of the worm or was it the name of the color? Especially one which springs from putrefaction. Those which devour plants, metaphorically used of a weak and despised man, especially scarlet color. And then you have shani, crimson, a deep scarlet. So you have a light scarlet and a deep scarlet, just saying. It adheres together with its, let's see what, it's Coccus iliceus, which adheres together with its eggs to the leaves of the ilex, crimson garments. Properly, it is bright color dyed. Basically, all of these colors are connected to something in nature, something that produces this color. But they are very similar. They're all from the same color palette, if you will. Then it says Shesh and 6. It's the ordinal number 6, if you will. Mashazar, not Mashazam, but Mashazar. From twisted, to twist a thread from right to left, or backhanded, to twist together several threads. You get an idea. You're talking about taking the threads and now you're twisting them together. Ma'aseh, you're the asa. It's a noun of action of a verb, that which anyone makes or does, a deed and action. You know, when you have all the arguments, of course, the Jews may not know about this, but Christians would. In Christianity, there's all these arguments about you don't do the deeds, you don't do the works. And the words for works and the words for deeds are all intertwined. or interchangeable, I should say. This is your Hebrew word. That's where the whole Christian argument about we don't live by works, we live by faith, and then the Jews say you can't live by faith unless you live by works, right? Of course, the Jews are right about this, by the way. Without works, without doing the works, you're not faithful. So if you don't do the works, faithfulness is a dead issue, right? Just saying, just in case anyone knows what I'm talking about. There's a veiled thing in there. So this is doing deeds. Metaphorically, it's called fruit. The fruit of your labor, because you did the deeds, and these are the fruits of the things that come from the tree of your life, if you will. All right, then it's hoshev. This is the word for to think, to meditate, to devise. The primary idea seems to be that of computing and reckoning, to think out, to invent, to compose as a song. And by the way, for those of you who are not songwriters, there are guys that they write songs. And I ran across this guy one time when I was working in the music industry, and I was asked to lay down what we call the scratch track for his song. And so he wrote these words. I'll never forget them. Love is like a summer rain. Sounds good, right? But he followed that with sometimes here, but always a pain. And I questioned the man. I'm like, really? A summer rain is always a pain? You're just trying to make them rhyme. Say something that makes sense. And nope, that's what the Lord gave me. And there was no talking to him, right? Successful songwriters, and I've known a few, they don't get tied into that idea that it's something comes down from above, or you're snatching something from out here and it's going in here and coming out here and you leave it alone. No, real songwriters know that you write it out and you rewrite it and you rewrite it and you rewrite it until not only does it rhyme at the right time, but it makes sense all the way through from beginning to end. So you realize that the computing and the thinking and the reckoning, it's the working of this piece of art. All right, then you have Ya'aseh. It is from the word asa. So it's Yah would be like he does or he makes. It's to labor, to work about, to produce, to manufacture. So it's the work that this artisan, the result of what this artisan has made. Then it says otah, which is, it's really the word et, but they've added the feminine gender to it because of the sentence itself requires that. So it has no meaning. It just points to something. And then it says keruvim. Now you remember that they say cherub in English, a creature with four faces, the face of a man, a lion, an eagle, and an ox in one place, and the face of a cherub, a lion, and an eagle, and an ox in another. Don't know what to do with that. I mean, what I call that when you're trying to make things that don't make sense make sense. Mm-hmm. No. Apologetics. If you're apologetics, then you're going to say, well, obviously the face of a cherub is the face of a man. I'm just saying, there's a way to make that make sense, right? So your translation in verse 31, and you will make a curtain from blue, purple, scarlet, and crimson, and 6 from fine, which is the twisted linen, the twisting of it. That's what makes it fine, because it's used idiomatic, if you will. They mean fine. The words are twisted, right? So 6 from fine linen, of course. That's what it becomes. From fine linen, and keruvim, made from imagination. So no one knows what the keruvim look like, right? it has to come from their imagination. I mean, we have some idea what they look like, but not completely. And then how they're, they got to strike a pose or whatever. All of that comes from the imagination and the workings of the artisan by using this twisted fine linen. All right, so moving. Oh, wait. Before we move on, I wanted to look at something. I did not have time to add this to the book. Make sure I'm not. Let's see if I wanted to add something. Oh, I definitely have the wrong glasses on for this. I laid them right over there. Sorry about that. I have to switch back and forth. I think I don't actually need it until the next verse, but I want to make sure. Yeah, this will be in the next verse. There was an ink pen in here. Where'd that go? We'll get to something in here in a minute. All right, so I seem to be able to read out of these. I'll just try that. Okay, so we're moving on to 32. Literally in English, it says, and put them, her, upon 4 columns, shittim from overlaying gold, and hooks there, gold upon 4 bases, silver. Okay, so it says, ve na tata. Natan, Nathan, that's the word for give. A give is also from the idea of put. It's to give, to cause, to receive, to give into the hand. In other words, for someone to gain the victory, he's been given the victory, though really won it, to deliver into the power of anyone. So if the state people have arrested somebody and they deliver him over to the feds, they have given him to the feds. It's all that, it's used in that way, of course, in the Bible. To give fruit, right? It grows on the tree, so the tree gives fruit. To have compassion for anyone is to ascribe glory or strength to anyone. To give anyone into custody, which we've already covered. It's a phrase used in wishing, oh, that anyone would give, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking for to set, to put, to place. It's used of making a covenant because it establishes the rules that everybody is to live by. And without the rules, there is no covenant. Just throwing that in there for a good measure. Then it's followed by ota. And again, that's that word et in the feminine because of the use of the sentence, or because the structure of the sentence. And it's a pointer. It has no meaning. It's just a pointer pointing to something. Then it uses the Hebrew word all, which means upon, above, over, those sort of things. Then it says arba'a. That's the number 4. Amude, 4 columns. These are columns. They're pillars, posts. What was the other word I was using? Planks could be said of that. What? You could use those words, but it's more the idea of you could take a tree and you cut all the limbs off of it and you make a post out of it. That can be a column. And it can be called a pillar. There's another word I was using earlier in this chapter, and it's just eluding me at the moment. But you can't think of this as something like Roman columns, where made of stone and all that, because we're talking about a movable tent, and they're not going to have, 10 cubits in height. You're not going to have columns that are 10 cubits in height made out of stone. Even if you made it out of smaller pieces and portions. How are you going to move those things? Not going to happen. So these are going to be made out of trees. You know, they're going to be cut down. And that doesn't mean, because it's using this word, that they're this big around. They can be that big around. It doesn't matter. But you got to have these 4 columns. Then it's shittim. So obviously it's going to be made of the shittim. It's a large tree growing in Egypt and Arabia, having the bark covered with black thorns. It has blackish pods. The wood is very hard, and when it grows old, it resembles ebony. So then you have that's followed by metzupim. From overlaying, it's that word to shine bright, to make it brilliant, to make it look great, to be lovely, those sort of things. It's metaphorically, it's used of prophets who, like watchmen, declare future events, which is nonsensical. That's something that Christians put in there. That's a Christian thing, not a Jewish thing, but it is in a Jewish book. I'm not real sure why we're using it that way, but anyway, this is so you're going to overlay these columns that are made out of this shittim tree with what? You know what's coming. Zahab. That's what's going to make it splendorous and bright and beautiful and shiny and all of that sort of thing is the gold. Then it says vavehem, and hooks there, as in Their, if you will, they're hooks. It's a peg, it's a nail, it's a hook. Will be zahab. They will also be made of gold, but this will not be covered with gold. These things will be made of gold, so the hooks will be heavy, but they will be soft. I mean, they're going to be malleable. Then it says all, which is upon, above, on top of, arba, that's 4, adne, 4 holes, that's the sockets, a hole, an opening, a hollow, chasef, so this thing that's hollow will be silver, it'll be made of silver. It's the word that they use for money, because this was used for money back in that day. So your translation then is, and you will put it on 4 columns of shittim wood overlaid with gold. They're hooks of gold on 4 holes of silver. Okay. Now, for this to make a little more sense, let's look at what Casuto said. He said, they're hooks made of gold, that is, small pegs shaped like the ancient letter Vav. The ancient letter Vav basically looks like a T, or perhaps you could say a cross, only it's kind of, what's that word? I don't want to say cursive, that's not the right word. Italicized, but it's backwards. Instead of leaning the way you would think of as an italicized T, it's going the other way. So it can kind of look like a Y, but it would have something protruding from the bottom of that top thing on the Y. He said, which resemble the Y, whose perpendicular shafts would be inserted into the tops of the pillars, and upon whose 2 tenons, which bifurcated above and projected from the pillars, the wooden pole from which the veil hung would be laid. Okay, let me see if I can maybe draw you a picture of this, because I just don't think this is making much sense. I wish I would have thought to get me a thicker pen. That's what I meant, was a magic marker. I don't know if this is going to make it easier for you guys to understand what they're doing here, or if it'll make it harder, but we'll see. Awesome. Got it. All right, so please do not attempt to adjust your set, your dial, your whatever. This is the way it looked in their day, and it is slanted like that. So they're fastening this somehow. Don't know for sure how it was fastened. Maybe they sharpened this end and drove it in from this end, which would have left you something to hook onto. Would make sense to me. Or somehow if this was driven in, you still have this as a hook, but then this would make it poke out. So I think this is probably the more likely, is that this was driven into something. But that would bring it more this way. Still, though, you'd have a good enough angle here to hang something on. So if this was driven in at least part of the way, and then this maybe flattened out against the wood, you would still have a nice hook up here to hang a ring on. That makes some sense? I hope so. Okay. So let's move on. Oh, before I move on, though, no, 4 holes of silver. Okay, we're up at the top of this thing, not at the bottom. I was thinking of something else. All right, so moving on to 33. Literally in English, it's, and put them, the curtain, under the hooks, and brought you there from house to curtain, chest the testimony, and make divided it, the curtain, to you between the holy and between the holy, the holies. Between holy, the holies. I put an added the in there that didn't go. So it starts off with Vedna Tata. Remember that? Natan, Nathan, that word, where do we get the word Nathan? It's, so we're going to place, we're going to set, to put, to establish, if you will. Good example. Those are good meanings for that word. Then it says et, which is pointing to something. Ha parochet. Remember, we started off, you got to make the curtain. So you're going to place this curtain, this veil, tachat, under, so below something, hake rashim, under the hooks. Okay, that may sound funny, because if you're putting them under the hook, what's going to hold it, right? But if there are round rings on it, then the curtain is under the hook, the ring is hanging from the hook, right? But if it's round holes in it, which I don't think was the way it was designed, but if there are round holes in it, then it's hanging on the hook, but it's still technically under it, even though it's covering part of it up. So I think it's more about it's going to be a ring that's hanging on that hook and the curtain being under it. I hope that makes some sense. Without actually having these things where I can really show you the real thing, is really difficult to explain all of this. And finding images of this has just proven to be all but impossible. All right, that's the hooks, and I've shown you what the hook looks like. This is vehe vita, and brought you or bring you. Things are, the tense is used very differently in Hebrew than it is in English. If we put something in past tense, we think of it as you've already done it. And here he's telling them what to do as if they've already done it, right? So understand that tense in Hebrew is not the same as tense in English. So don't worry about it when I say and brought you. That is correct. But you think of and bring you, okay? It's to bring something from point A to point B. It's really what you think it means. Then it's Shama, which is, Shama, Israel, here, and all that. This is a sound-alike word. Shema, there, over there, over there, over there. Shema, 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 Shema. I hope you get it. There, over there. Pointing some place in particular. Mibet, which is from the house. A movable house, a tent, right? So they're using this of the housing. I'm going to put it at the housing, or from by the housing, whatever. La parochet, so it's the housing is the curtain, the place, the thing that hooks up is called the housing. So they use the word bait, the word for house. But they're using it the same way we would use housing. Then it says et Aaron. Now Aharon, which would be Aaron, this is Aaron, the chest, the ark. Things into which things are collected to be kept, used of a money chest, used of a coffin, but most frequently of the holy ark in which the 2 tablets of the law were kept. Right? So it's the ark. Then it says ha-edut. So it's the ark of the testimony. Edut. Ed. Testimony. The word, the name Ed. Testimony. A precept of God, a law especially used of the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, because they testify what the law is, right? The 10 Commandments, when you look at them on a piece of paper, on a piece of parchment, on a scroll, whether it's made of lambskin or deer skin, because lots of people's Torah scrolls are actually made out of deer skin. Especially from certain parts of the world where finding sheep is all but impossible, they would put it on deer skin. Anyway, the stuff that's written down on those different types of things, that's called the testimony, because it testifies to the covenant. The covenant is inside. It's not on a paper. The thing that holds the writing is the testimony of the covenant that's supposed to be in your heart. All right, and we've talked about that before. So then it says, Vehi vedilah, and divided it. So in other words, separated. Ha-pa-rochet, separated. The curtain is there to separate the curtain, the veil. Lachem, so you will separate. Then it's bain, which means between. It's another sound-alike word, bain, which can be son or children. This is between ha-kodesh. I was trying to say koshesh. I got it backwards there. HaKodesh, it's the holy. It's holiness. What is holy? A holy thing. A thing consecrated to God, especially in silver, consecrated in the temple. A sanctuary, used of the holy tabernacle in the temple, especially of the body of the temple. A most holy thing, as the ark, the holy vessel, sacred. Anyway, things that are holy, for instance, the scriptures tell us to keep the Shabbat, the Sabbath, holy, right? And so what we do to keep it holy is, one, we celebrate it on the same day, in the same way, at the same time, every time. Because that repetition is partly what makes that thing holy. So things that are set aside are things that are used only for the service of God. So the ark, only thing it's used for is God. The table that the bread was put on, only used for God. The candelabra that sat in the temple, only used for God. It had no other use, and so it was set apart. It was separated from all other things, and it was kept holy. The clothes that I wear on Shabbat when I teach, I only wear them on Shabbat, and as soon as I'm finished teaching, I change out of them. So I don't have a lot of, you may notice, I think I'm wearing the same shirt I wore last week. It's been washed and all that since then, but I only wear it on Shabbat. I have 2 or 3 shirts from which to choose. Same way with the pants, the socks, all of that is set aside for this purpose. And so it is holy, right? And I think it's important that we understand that it's this, we do the same thing, and that's partially what makes it holy. And it says uvein. So remember, this is bain uvein. It's between, and now it's and between. Kodesh. You have this word again. So between the holy and between holy. So it's the same word with the same meaning. HaKodashim. Holy, the holy. So it's between holy, that which is holy, and the holy, and holy the holies. So it's, this one's in plural. Holiness, the things that are holy, consecrated to God. It's exactly the same word. And you know what happens when they start using the same word several times. So in 26:33, you have, and you will put the curtains between the hooks that you will bring in that place from the house to the curtain, the chest of testimony, and you will cause the curtain to divide it between the holy and the holiest holy. So there's a holy place and there's a holy, holy place. In other words, the chest, Onkelos added the definite article the to Aaron, or chest. In other words, ha-Aaron. The definite article was not necessary in biblical Hebrew, but because a required part of post-biblical Hebrew as the Jewish world became more Hellenized. I don't think I either read that wrong or heard myself read that wrong or something. Anyway, biblical Hebrew does not need that definite article, which is the word the. Call that the definite article. It didn't need it. Honestly, as much as I know about biblical Hebrew, the definite article could truly just be completely left out of that language and never really needs to be there. There are times when they put it there for grammar reasons, but honestly, it doesn't need to be. Now, when you become post-biblical, after the biblical period, then they establish some very hard and fast rules, which is why Onkelos put it there, even though it wasn't there in the text. Because he was just, I guess he didn't want to get letters from 4,000 people trying to correct his grammar. Because that's just exactly what would have happened. All right, now, another thing or two that needs to be mentioned here. We're at 33, right? Okay. Casuto said the meaning is not that the veil should be put up first and thereafter the ark should be brought to its place, for the space between the pillars would have been insufficient. Because the argument became on this, let me see if I put, no I didn't. The argument became, oh, see, now you got to put the ark in place and then you got to build the temple around it. And others said that's ridiculous. You build the temple and then you bring the ark in. And he's saying the meaning is not that the veil should be put up first and thereafter the ark should be brought to its place, where the space between the pillars would have been insufficient. So he's basically arguing with himself here. Then he goes on to say the intention here is only to specify the place of the ark, not the order of the stages in the erection of the tabernacle, according to the procedure of erection, which is expressly described in chapter XL. I have no idea what that means. I don't know what the number is on XL. Then it says verses 20 through 21. The ark with the haropet upon it was to be brought to its place first, and thereafter the pillars and the veil were to be put up, and they would bar the way to the removal of the ark. Properly, the ark should be shut in, and it should not be possible to take it out from its place except when the tabernacle was taken down or in abnormal circumstances, I'll put this, such as war, uh, by the removal of the pillars from their position. So now these 4 pillars, the ark would literally have to go in before the 4 pillars, because if you don't do it, you can't get the ark in there. I mean, maybe you could, but it would be very difficult, right? But that's assuming your pillars are very big around. If the pillars are more like tree posts, posts made from trees, like you're supposed to make them out of, they may not have been so super wide that the ark couldn't have been put in. I think we're missing this point. The problem with all of the arguments that come around in the building of the tabernacle is that these people are arguing never having built a tabernacle. And then of the people who have built the tabernacle in the wilderness, and there's 2 or maybe 3 of them that have done this, that you can go and visit in Israel and in other places, I think. It seems like someone did one, maybe not to full scale, but here in the U.S. somewhere, if I remember right. But they build them according to that which they already believe, rather than try to figure out, for instance, if you build one in Ohio, where are you going to get shittim wood? And if you don't go and look at shittim wood, you don't know how tall do these trees grow, how big around are these trees, do they grow straight up and down like pillars? Are these pillars going to have to be the joining of some of these trees together? There's a lot of questions that are not answered if you don't use the actual wood and you don't know what it actually looks like. So if you're in Israel and you happen to build them out of that, which the one that I've seen was not built out of shittim trees, then you're making certain assumptions. You follow what I'm saying? For this to actually be figured out, somebody has to use the real material. They then have to know exactly what a cubit is, which at this point is impossible to know. We think it's about 18 inches. Nobody knows for sure. But that's just kind of what we think the length of from here to here would be on a man of that time period, but we still can't be sure. So 18 inches is probably close enough to figure out a lot of things, but there's a lot of stuff that comes up. And I guess this is as good a place as any to talk about this. One of the issues that you have is the top of the tabernacle. Anybody who's ever put up a large tent knows that something has to hold that roof up. And there is nothing in this chapter, nothing about the tabernacle that tells you how to keep that roof from caving in. Because if you just drape it across, it's going to do this. Gravity's going to pull it down. If you pull it straight across, it doesn't matter to me if it's just flat as it can be. When you get a good hard rain, it's going to pull it down. And then that's going to pull at the walls. And you've got a big water issue now, right? So there's a lot of things that were not answered. So we don't know what the roof of this thing would have looked like. We don't know if it was flat. If it was flat, what did they do about the water? If it wasn't flat and it was arched, why was it never spoken of? We don't know. This is all because God had either explained things well enough to Moshe when he was up in the mountain that he perceived all of these things and knew what to do, or God gave him a vision of the way it was done in heaven, and he from that knew what to do. We can't be positive about any of those things. So there's a lot of the arguments that come up, and nobody knows for sure. So we don't know that the ark was put in first and everything was built around it, or that it was basically built, and when it was time to put the curtain in, which is what it looks like is the way it goes, when it's time to put the curtain in, then you put the ark in, and then you build the curtain, which is what Kasuda is arguing here. Yeah, he went on some grammar stuff here that seemed important at the time that don't seem important now. But he did point out that, oh, I'm getting ahead of myself on that. That's why it doesn't seem important now. I'm on the wrong verse. Okay, we'll work our way to that. So hopefully some of these things are covered at this point. Verse 34, and give you the mercy seat upon chest, the testimony in holy, the holies. So you have venatata, so you will place. It's in the word is give, but it's in this case, and you will place it's pointing at something. Ha ka poret. That's the, remember that they call it the mercy seat in the English Bibles, but it's the lid. It's the covering. It's the piece that goes on top. Then it says, so you'll put the top, the lid, all, which means upon or over. You'll put it on Aaron. You put the lid on the chest. So you're going to bring the chest in without the lid, and then you're going to put the lid on the chest. Why do you do that? Well, think about how heavy that's going to be. You have a chest that was made of wood, if you recall, then it's overlaid on the outside and then on the inside with gold. That's going to be a heavy chest. And it's got the round rings and the sticks that go through and all of that. You add that to it. That's what lifts it up, but that also adds weight to it. Then you put a lid that's made out of solid gold with all the cherubim, the cherubs on top and all of that. You add all of that together. Well, you have two issues here. One, that you got some serious heaviness here, and two, it's probably top heavy. But when you're setting it in there, he says, bring it in, then place the lid on top. So obviously they could touch the lid. Just saying. So it says, so you put the lid up on the chest, ha'edu, of the testimony, be kodesh, which means in holy, ha kodashim, the holies. So this is the holiest place in the tabernacle. So your translation is, and you will place the chaporet, that's the top called the mercy seat in English, on the chest, the testimony in the holiest holy. I'm just calling it holiest holy instead of holy the holies. Doesn't matter, you can say it either way. In other words, the testimony, even Ezra said that the Torah, i.e. the tables of stone, were the testimony of God's covenant with Israel. He couldn't be more right, because the words written on those tablets testified to what the covenant was. Rashi wrote that the testimony was the entire account of the 40 years written at the end of Moshe's life and then placed in the ark. No doubt an argument against those who said Moshe could not have written the entire Torah, since much of it took place after his death. Yeah, see, there's this whole thing about Moshe is accredited with writing the Torah, right? And so now, because all these years later, we call the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible the Torah, there then becomes these arguments, well, Moshe couldn't possibly have written it because he was dead through a large portion of it. Instead of realizing that what they called the Torah at this time in history, not now, not 2,000 years ago, but moving all the way back to the time of Moshe. At that time, the part that they called the Torah, the law, if you will, is the law, the Mishpatim. That was the part that Moshe wrote. Whether he wrote, in the beginning God created in the heavens and the earth, we don't know. All we know for sure is he wrote the law. Maybe he wrote all that beginning stuff. Maybe he didn't. It doesn't really matter. What we know for sure that he wrote was the law, and that was the testimony that was on the tablets. The book of Genesis was not on the tablets. So Rashi is wrong. He's trying to take stuff from his time and push it back to the time of Moshe. Don't do it. It's bad form. It's wrong. Stay away. Okay. There is some argument that comes about because of the way a couple of these words are spelled. And Kasuda pointed out that the difference in the testimony, in the termination rather, at the end of the word of ta in verse 34 and okay, it's the one word in verse 34 ends in a tate, not a tate, a tav. And that tav, when you say the word, it sounds like ta at the end. And then when you get to this verse, in verses 32 and 33, you get ta. Sounds the same, right? But it has a hey, a feminine ending at the end of it that the first one didn't have. And he says, it's merely a divergence of spelling due to the usual tendency of the Masoretic scholars to introduce variations of this kind. There's so many people trying to make something out of every little thing. If you spell one word without the feminine ending and you spell that same word with the feminine ending later, oh, now we've got all this hidden, super, ultra secret stuff. No, they just did it to break up the monotony. That's really all it amounted to. So he pointed that out because this is where somebody eventually is going to give you that argument. And just don't worry about it. All right, so verse 35. Oh, wow. I've been going too slow today, I guess. I don't know that I can do this. Wow, sorry about that. But if I finish this up next week, we'll wind up having a 5-minute message. I'm just going to push these last couple of verses. Sorry. All right, so verse 35, and set you the table from outside to curtain, and the menorah opposite the table upon side Mishkan, southward, and the table upon shall give side north. All these words we've had, so I don't need a lot of time here. Vesanta, and set you, to put, to place, to set, to constitute. Sounds just like Natan, don't it? Just say it, same thing here. Just a different word. Set, then it says et, which is a pointer. Ha-shulchan. Do you remember shulchan? It means table. So called from its being extended, from being spread out. Now, a table can also be the ground. Thou preparest a table before me, right? To use King James Version. Well, actually, the Jews used to talk that way too. Everybody did at one point that speaks English. But the table is the place prepared for the people to eat. And if you're sheep, it's the ground. Anywho, shulchan is normally a table. Michutz, from outside. And that's what it means. From outside, la po rochet, from outside the curtain. The et ha menorah. Whoa, avalanche. That thing. You know, the big one. Remember our picture of that? So you're going to set this lampstand outside. And then it says nohach. That's opposite. Ha shulchan. So on one side, if you're facing in the door, on the left side, you'll have the lampstand. And on the right side, you'll have the table. That's all that was said. And they're on the outside. They're in the holy place, not the holy holiest, not the holy holy place, right? The single holy. So in this area, outside of that, you're going to have the menorah on one side and the shulchan, the table, on the other side. This is upon, all, the word all, which is upon or above. Zela, that's the side. So on one side or the other. Ha Mishkan. So that's the fancy name for this tent. Te Mana, the southward side. The HaShulchan, that's all, which is upon T10, You shall give, you set, you'll place it. Where are you going to do it? Zela on the side, Zaphon, the north. So one's on the south side, one's on the north side. Because remember, the front of it's the east, the back of it's the west. So it's, and you will set the table outside the curtain and menorah across from the table on the southward side of the Mishkan, and the table shall be placed on the northern side. So I think we've covered that real well. Let me see if there was something I wanted to add here. That's 35. Yeah, so Casuto said basically what I just said. In other words, on the left side as one enters, and the lampstand on the north side. Okay, so you got the one on the one side, the one on the other. It's just real simple. 36. And do you covering to entrance the tent, violet and purple and scarlet, crimson, and 6 from twisted did needlework. Does this sound real familiar to you? It should. It basically already had the whole verse. Va'asita, that's the asa, to labor, to work, to manufacture, to produce, all of those things. So you're going to make something here. Masach, you're going to make a covering. A covering. Not a covering, but a covering. Especially used of a veil, the veil of the tent. Lefatach, there's your word for entrance. So this will be on the east side, right? Because you've got all the other 3 sides taken care of. This will be on the east side, the entrance, the opening, the place where you go in. Ha-ohel. So now we're saying, instead of calling it the tabernacle, we're calling it by its technical name, tent. So you're going to make this veil that goes over the entrance of the tent. Techelet, that's your word for violet. That's the mussel that's found in the Mediterranean that was lost for all that time. Then it's ve argaman, which is the purple, the reddish purple color from the shellfish. And then it's ve tolaat. There's your scarlet color that comes from that worm. Then you have shani, which is your crimson that came from the Coccus ilicis. Those are the eggs that make the crimson color. Then it's Veshesh, and 6. Ma-shazar, that's the twisted, that becomes fine linen. Ma-aseh, that's the work. Rokem, but this is needlework. Remember, this was done a little bit differently last time. But this is done from the needlework. Okay, so your translation is, and you will make a covering for the entrance of the tent of blue, purple, scarlet, and crimson, and 6 will be made from fine needlework. So the last one was they'll be made from fine linen, and this is from fine needlework. So it's done a little bit differently. I better see if there's anything I need to add from here. He did say, Casuto did say, the ornamentation on it was not to be woven like the designs of the veil and on the curtains of the tabernacle, but embroidered, the work of the embroiders. So the first one is woven into it. It's actually part of, like, I guess like a rug, like a
where the colors are woven in.
Okay, these black stripes are woven in. It's actually part of it. You don't feel a bump or anything. Where this one, they sew it in after the fact, right? Like the silver ones that jump out. That's sewn in. Good? All right. I knew that would be important. Okay, then our last verse. And do you to covering 5 columns, shittim, and overlay he you with them gold, and hooks their gold, and he pour out you to them 5 bases brass. Again, we've had it, but this is a little bit different. The number is different. So the Holy of Holies, it was 4, right? And now we're going to the front of the tent, and it's going to be 5. So it's ve'asita, and you will labor, you'll work, you'll manufacture, you'll produce. So you got to make something again. Then it says la masach, the covering, a veil. Hamisha, 5. Amudei, 5 columns, pillars, posts. Wish I could think of the other word. But anyway, these things that you put up front. Shittim, that's that large tree that grows in Egypt and Arabia that's has the black thorns and the blackish pods, and the wood is very hard and it resembles ebony. And it says ve zipita, and overlay he used. So you're going to make it shine, you're going to make it bright, you're going to overlay it. Otam, that's the pointer. Zahab, you're going to overlay these with gold. And this is not going to be what's that when they like laser gold onto something that's real cheap and it wipes off? It's not gold plating. This is you make a thick plate of gold and wrap it around there. This is going to be pretty heavy. And it says va vehen, and the hooks. Remember what the hook looks like? The kind of backwards cursive I or T, not cursive I, cursive T. Zahav, so the hooks of gold. Ve yazakta, and you'll pour out lachem, and you will pour out hamisha, 5 adnei holes. They're sockets, they're openings, they're hollows. So these things, instead of hammering out this thing, this is going to be, you make a mold and you pour out nechoshet. These will be made of brass, copper, brass, whatever it is. It's difficult to say for sure now. Then it's, so your translation becomes, and you will make a covering with 5 columns of shittim and overlay them with gold, and their hooks of gold. And you will pour out 5 holes of brass, or circles or rings of brass for them. Okay, so I'm pretty sure there was 1 or 2 other things I wanted to add to this. Casito said the screen was to hang, it seems, behind the pillars, whilst the pole apparently was not merely to lie on the hooks. Wait a minute. Merely to lie on the hooks, but was to be tied to them with thongs or by some other method, so that the wind should not easily be able to shift the screen from its place. That's a wild-haired guess on his part, but probably correct. Then he went on and said, since the screen would separate the holy place from the court, it would partly belong to the court, and hence the pedestals were made of bronze like the other articles of the court. Maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong. I kind of think it's right, but again, that's pure speculation. Okay. He said something I thought was kind of interesting. The space between the pillars of the screen was narrower even than that between the pillars of the veil. Consequently, the screen with its pillars formed an even more effective barrier to the removal of the ark. The ark and the kaporet upon it would remain shut in within the tabernacle, where they would be entirely safe. For it would be impossible to take them away from their place until the tabernacle was dismantled, when an occasion would arise to bring them forth from there for an exceptional purpose, such as at the crossing of the Jordan, or when the ark compassed Jericho. It would be necessary to lift the veil and to move its middle pillar apart, and similarly the screen at the doorway of the tabernacle would have to be lifted and its central pillar removed from its position. speculatory, and I don't think it has a lot of leg to stand on, given that this was a tabernacle, it was a tent. How hard would it be to take it out of a tent? I mean, you're not making it safe in a tent, even with those sticks standing up that would so easily be taken down by an enemy. So I think it's a little out there for me, but if you want to go with that thinking, you're welcome to. That concludes our journey through chapter 26. Shalom and shalom, y'all.